The Lotus Feet of China. Beauty through pain. One of the most infamous traditions in history was the practice of foot binding in China, a custom that lasted for nearly 1,000 years. Beginning as early as the 10th century during the Song dynasty, foot binding was rooted in ideals of beauty, status, and obedience, but it caused immense suffering for countless generations of women. The process began when girls were as young as 4 or 5 years old. Their feet were tightly bound with cloth, curling the toes under and forcing the arch to break. Over time, the bones deformed, shrinking the foot to the highly coveted lotus size of just 3 inches. Walking became painful, often impossible without assistance, but the tiny, misshapen feet were seen as a symbol of elegance, femininity, and refinement. Beyond beauty, bound feet became a marker of social class. Women with lotus feet were considered more marriageable, especially into wealthy families, because the practice suggested they would be obedient wives confined to the home. For poorer families, however, the tradition was crippling, literally. Women with bound feet struggled to work in the fields or perform labor, locking them into poverty. The physical consequences were devastating. Bones broke, infections set in, and many women were left with lifelong disabilities. Yet despite the pain, the practice persisted for centuries, passed down from mothers to daughters as both cultural pride and burden. Efforts to ban foot binding began in the late 19th and early 20th centuries as reformers sought to modernize China. By the 1940s, the tradition had largely disappeared, though some rural areas continued the practice in secret. Today, surviving women with lotus feet are rare, but their stories serve as haunting reminders of the extremes cultures can reach in the pursuit of beauty. The lotus feet tradition stands as one of history's most bizarre and brutal customs, blending social status, aesthetics, and suffering into a practice that endured far longer than reason should have allowed. The Pharaoh's servants and death. Ancient Egypt's ritual of sacrifice. In the grandeur of ancient Egypt, pharaohs were not just kings. They were seen as living gods. Their rule extended beyond life, and their journey into the afterlife demanded the same wealth, power, and attendance they had enjoyed on earth. This belief gave rise to one of history's most bizarre and chilling traditions, burying servants alongside the pharaoh so they could continue to serve him in death. This practice, known as retainer sacrifice, was most common during Egypt's first dynasty, around 3100 BCE. Archaeological excavations at the Royal Cemetery of Abydos revealed tombs where dozens, sometimes hundreds, of servants were buried near their rulers. These individuals were not symbolic figures or statues. They were real people who were killed or buried alive to accompany the pharaoh into the afterlife. Evidence shows that these retainers were carefully arranged in burial pits around the pharaoh's tomb, often with goods, tools, and food. It was believed their spirits would rise alongside their ruler to continue their duties for eternity. Unlike other cultures that use symbolic offerings or effigies, Egypt's early dynasties took the tradition literally, making the afterlife a continuation of earthly hierarchy. The practice, however, was short-lived in Egyptian history. By the end of the first dynasty, pharaohs began replacing human sacrifices with Shapti figurines, small statues carved to act as magical servants in the afterlife. These figurines were safer, symbolic substitutes that fulfilled the same religious purpose without the bloodshed. The existence of retainer sacrifice in ancient Egypt adds a darker layer to the civilization often admired for its pyramids, art, and medicine. It reminds us that even cultures that advanced human knowledge also carried traditions that strike modern minds as cruel and bizarre. For the pharaohs, however, it was simply an extension of divine order, power in life and power beyond death. Sati in India. Widows on the funeral pyre. One of the most controversial and tragic traditions in history was the practice of sati in India. Rooted in ancient Hindu customs, sati involved a widow immolating herself, either voluntarily or under societal pressure, on her husband's funeral pyre. Though often described as an act of devotion, it became one of the most debated and condemned rituals of South Asian history. The origins of sati are difficult to trace, but references to it appear in texts and records as early as the 4th century CE. It was never widespread across all of India, yet where it did occur, it carried immense symbolic weight. A widow who performed sati was often celebrated as the ideal wife, the embodiment of loyalty, purity, and sacrifice. For her family, it could bring prestige and honor. In practice, however, the ritual often exposed darker realities. Many widows were young, sometimes only teenagers, married to older men through arranged unions. For these women, widowhood meant social exclusion, poverty, and lifelong stigma. In that context, sati was presented as a noble alternative, but in reality, many were coerced or forced into the flames by community or family pressure. Accounts from witnesses describe the horrifying scenes. Widows led to the pyre, sometimes drugged, sometimes struggling, as priests and crowds chanted prayers. While a few cases may have been voluntary acts of devotion, countless others were tragedies born of social pressure and lack of choice. The ritual drew condemnation from reformers within India, as well as from British colonial authorities. In the early 19th century, Indian reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy campaigned passionately against the practice, framing it as both cruel and contrary to Hindu philosophy. In 1829, under Governor-General William Bentinck, the British outlawed sati in colonial India. Despite the ban, isolated cases continued into the 20th century, shocking the world. Today, sati is illegal and widely condemned, remembered not as a spiritual act but as a grim tradition that highlighted the oppression of women in patriarchal societies. It remains a stark reminder that what is framed as honor or devotion in one era may, in hindsight, reveal devastating human cost. Aztec human sacrifice, blood for the gods. Of all the bizarre traditions in history, few are as infamous, or as misunderstood, as the ritual human sacrifices of the Aztec Empire. To the Aztecs, these ceremonies were not acts of cruelty, but sacred duties, ensuring the survival of their people by feeding the gods with the most precious offering of all, human life. The practice was rooted in Aztec cosmology. They believed the sun god Huitzilopochtli required nourishment in the form of human blood and hearts to keep the universe in balance. Without these offerings, the sun might fail to rise, plunging the world into darkness and chaos. Sacrifice was therefore not only religious, but cosmic, an obligation to keep existence itself alive. Ceremonies often took place atop towering pyramids like the Templo Mayor in Tenochtitlan. Captives, usually prisoners of war, were led up the steps, laid on a stone altar, and their hearts cut out by priests using obsidian blades. The beating heart was offered to the gods, while the body was sometimes cast down the pyramid steps. Some festivals involved staggering numbers of sacrifices. Spanish chroniclers, though often prone to exaggeration, described thousands being killed during grand dedications or seasonal rituals. Modern scholars debate the scale, but there is no doubt that the practice was both frequent and central to Aztec religious life. To the Aztecs, being sacrificed was not seen solely as horror. Many captives considered it an honorable death, guaranteeing passage into the afterlife as companions of the gods. Still, for enemies captured in war, the fate was terrifying, used as both spiritual act and political display of dominance. When the Spanish arrived in the early 16th century, they were both horrified and fascinated by the rituals. For them, it confirmed the Aztecs as barbaric, fueling their justification for conquest. Yet modern historians view these ceremonies as deeply tied to Aztec identity and worldview, however brutal they seem to us today. Aztec human sacrifice remains one of history's most chilling and bizarre traditions. Not senseless cruelty, but a complex, sacred duty born of a culture's struggle to explain its place in the cosmos. Roman vomitoriums, myth versus reality. Few ancient traditions have been as misunderstood as the Roman vomitorium. For centuries, people believed that vomitoriums were special rooms where Romans indulged in feasts, then deliberately vomited so they could continue eating. This image of gluttonous elites dining to excess has become a popular myth, but the truth is much stranger, and perhaps even more telling about Roman culture. In reality, a vomitorium was not a room for feasting at all. The term comes from the Latin vomere, meaning to spew forth. Vomitoria were the passageways in amphitheaters and stadiums, like the Colosseum, designed to let huge crowds exit quickly. Far from being chambers of excess, they were architectural marvels that allowed tens of thousands of spectators to pour in and out of Roman arenas efficiently. So where did the myth come from? The idea of Romans vomiting to continue eating likely emerged during the Renaissance and Enlightenment periods, when later writers exaggerated Roman decadence. Ancient sources like Seneca and Juvenal did describe the wealthy indulging in grotesque feasts, sometimes using feathers or emetics to force themselves to vomit. But this was not tied to vomitoriums themselves. Rather, it was an extreme practice among Rome's wealthiest elites. The myth stuck because it fit the image of Rome as both magnificent and corrupt. The notion of emperors and senators gorging themselves endlessly, sustained by a culture of excess, became a symbol of decline. Popular culture, from novels to films, happily repeated the story, cementing vomitoriums as a shorthand for Roman decadence. In truth, Roman feasts were elaborate affairs, filled with exotic foods, entertainment, and luxury. But most citizens lived modestly. Vomitoriums were about engineering, not gluttony. The confusion is a reminder of how myths often outlive facts, shaping how we imagine the past. So while Rome's banquets were indeed lavish, and some wealthy diners resorted to disturbing habits, the vomitorium was never a dining room. It was an exit corridor. Still, the legend persists, proving that sometimes the strangest traditions aren't real at all, but the stories we tell about them. Mummified monks of Japan, the path of self-mummification. In the mountains of northern Japan, a small sect of Buddhist monks once practiced a tradition so extreme and otherworldly that it still fascinates historians today. Sokushin Butsu, or self-mummification. Unlike Egyptian embalming or Andean mountain sacrifices, this ritual involved monks slowly turning themselves into living mummies through years of discipline and unimaginable suffering. The practice was followed by members of the Shingon sect between the 11th and 19th centuries. The process was long and painstaking, beginning with a special diet called moku-jikigyo, or tree eating. For up to 3,000 days, nearly a decade, the monk would eat only nuts, roots, and berries, stripping his body of fat and muscle. Later, he drank toxic teas made from the sap of the urushi tree, which acted both as a preservative and as a way to kill parasites that would otherwise consume the body after death. Once the monk had prepared his body, he would enter a stone chamber barely larger than his body. Sitting in the lotus position, he meditated while a bamboo tube provided air. Each day, he rang a bell to signal that he was still alive. When the bell stopped, the tube was removed, and the tomb was sealed. Years later, the tomb would be opened, and if the body was successfully preserved, the monk was enshrined as a Buddha, honored as having achieved the ultimate form of enlightenment. Not every attempt was successful. Many decomposed, despite the preparation. Yet dozens of successful Sokushin Butsu remain on display in temples across Japan, eerily lifelike in their preserved states. Though outlawed in the late 19th century, the tradition endures as a haunting testament to spiritual devotion taken to extremes. For these monks, mummification was not death, but transcendence. Proof that discipline, faith, and suffering could transform the human body into an eternal vessel of enlightenment. The finger-cutting ritual of the Dani people. Mourning through pain. In the highlands of Papua, Indonesia, the Dani people once practiced a mourning tradition that strikes outsiders as both shocking and deeply symbolic. Finger amputation as a way of expressing grief. For the Dani, grief was not just an emotional experience, but a physical one, something that had to be carved into the body itself. When a family member died, Close female relatives, particularly wives, mothers, and daughters, were expected to cut off a portion of their fingers. The act symbolized the pain of loss. As a finger was essential to the hand, so too was the deceased essential to the family. Removing a part of the body was a literal demonstration of the emptiness left behind. The process was often carried out with crude tools, such as stone blades or axes. To dull the pain, the finger was sometimes tied tightly with string until blood flow stopped, then chopped off quickly. Ash or clay would be applied to the wound to stop bleeding and promote healing. Over a lifetime, women who endured multiple losses might end up with only a few fingers remaining, their hands becoming a visible map of grief and survival. While shocking to outsiders, within the Dani culture, the ritual was a profound act of solidarity. It showed the strength of the mourner's bond with the deceased and offered a tangible way to cope with sorrow. The mutilation was not random cruelty, but a deeply embedded cultural expression of love, loyalty, and sacrifice. In recent decades, the Indonesian government has outlawed the practice, and younger Dani generations no longer engage in it. Still, elders in the community carry the scars of the tradition, their shortened hands standing as living records of loss. This ritual, while painful and bizarre to outside eyes, reminds us how cultures across the world have sought to make grief visible, turning inner sorrow into something the body itself could bear. The Cheese Rolling Festival of England, a tradition of chaos. Not every bizarre tradition in history is rooted in pain or death. Some are just wonderfully absurd. One of the strangest, and still ongoing, is the Cheese Rolling Festival in Gloucestershire, England, where brave or reckless participants hurl themselves down a steep hill in pursuit of a wheel of cheese. The event, held annually at Cooper's Hill near the town of Brockworth, dates back at least to the 18th century, though some historians believe it may have pagan origins linked to fertility rites or celebrating the arrival of spring. Regardless of its roots, it has evolved into one of Britain's quirkiest and most dangerous sporting traditions. Here's how it works. A 9-pound wheel of double Gloucester cheese is released from the top of a nearly vertical hill. A crowd of competitors sprints after it, tumbling, flipping, and crashing as gravity takes control. The hill is so steep that catching the cheese is nearly impossible. It quickly reaches speeds up to 70 miles per hour. The winner is simply the first person to reach the bottom. The spectacle is both hilarious and brutal. Over the years, participants have suffered broken bones, sprains, and concussions. Ambulances and medics are always on hand, and yet hundreds still line up for the chance to chase the cheese each year. Spectators gather by the thousands, drawn by the sheer ridiculousness of the event. Though authorities have occasionally tried to cancel or regulate the festival due to safety concerns, locals have fought to keep it alive, proudly defending it as part of their heritage. To them, it's not just a race, it's a symbol of tradition, community spirit, and pure eccentric fun. Compared to the grim rituals of other cultures, the cheese rolling festival might seem like lighthearted madness. Yet, in its own way, it captures the essence of bizarre traditions, a mix of danger, devotion, and identity, proving that humanity's quirks can be as joyful as they are strange. Traditions may seem bizarre from the outside, but they reveal what different cultures valued most, whether it was devotion, beauty, or even cheese rolling. Thank you for watching. If you learned anything, let me know by liking the video and comment below on what you would like to see in the future. History never runs out of surprises, and neither do we. So subscribe and join me for the next dive into the archives.